who is this man? Why are we studying the life of Moses? Now, allow me for a few minutes to unfold to you and unpack to you the life and interesting episode in the life of this man. There are 3 segments in the life of this man, 340 years. His life can be divided. The first 40 years of Moses' life was the growing up years he had in Egypt. And later on, I will tell you the story why he found himself in Egypt. The second segment of his life is the next 40 years where he found himself running away, fleeing in the Midian desert, where he got married there, had his family and children. And the last 40 years of the life of Moses was when he led the whole nation of Israel out of the bondage of Egypt to the promised land that God has given to Abraham. If you're familiar with this picture, for many of you, maybe my age or those that are older than me, we have watched the film The 10 Commandments. You remember? 3 hours you're in the movie theater watching this epic film by Charlton Heston. And this picture reminds you of Moses because during the time when Moses was born, the Israelites were growing so fast in number in Egypt that the Pharaoh and the Egyptian leaders were threatened because of the fastest growing slave in Egypt, the Israelites. So they said, we cannot afford that this man will grow so fast until such time that they become very, very powerful and they will overthrow us. So the Pharaoh of Egypt said, from now on, every male boy, infant boy, that will be born should be slaughtered or thrown into the Nile River. So there was this mass slaughter of children. And it was that time Moses was born, and the Bible tells us that his mom hid him for 3 months. Little did he realize that Moses was chosen by God after 80 years of his life, that he would return as the deliverer of the Israelites from the bondage in Egypt. So his mom put him in a basket, let the basket flow in the Nile River, with his sister Miriam was watching behind the bushes and watching where the basket where baby Moses was laid. And it's not an accident, maybe for some it's coincidence. One of the daughters of Pharaoh was taking a bath in the Nile River, and it was there that God led the basket to pass in front of the daughter of Pharaoh. She took the basket and she was surprised to see a baby, a Hebrew baby. The daughter of Pharaoh recognized that this is a Hebrew baby. And then Miriam came to the scene and said, you want me to find someone to take care of this baby? And Miriam got the mother of Moses to take care of Moses. So the daughter of Pharaoh said, okay, I'll even pay you. You take care of the child. And the next scene, Moses grew up in Egypt for the first 40 years. He was educated there. And you know, Egypt was the then known civilization of the world, that even until now, we cannot compete with the engineering, the structures of the Egyptian pyramid. Moses grew up in the midst of that civilization, and one day, according to the scripture, Moses went to where his people were, the Hebrew people, because in his heart he knew, I am a Hebrew, I belong to them. There's something in me. Why am I in Pharaoh's court and my people are suffering and slave in Egypt? So one day he went there, that the Bible tells us, he visited his people, the site, and he saw an Egyptian beating an Israelite, a Hebrew, and he came to the rescue, and the story went on, and he accidentally killed the Egyptian. Buried him, and then forget about it. The second day, after many days, he came back again, and he saw 2 Hebrew people fighting. And here comes Moses. I don't know what was going on in the mind of Moses. Was he thinking that I will kill all the Egyptians one by one? This is my way of delivering my people. Was it that in his intention? I don't know what was going on in the mind of Moses. But when the second time he visited his people, 2 Hebrew men were fighting. And Moses came to the scenario and said, don't fight. Both of you are brothers. And to his surprise, one of them turned to him and said, are you going to kill me just like you killed the Egyptian? And Moses was shocked that killing of the Egyptian was already spreading and even reached Pharaoh. So the next scene, we saw Moses fleeing Egypt, running away to Midian. This is the second 40 years of his life. So Moses ran to Midian to hide. Why? Because he was wanted in Egypt. In all the agencies of Egypt, maybe the NBI, the FBI, or whatever, CIA there, all the faces of Moses was there. This man is wanted for killing an Egyptian. So he ran. He ran away. He fled. And there he met, in Midian, he met his wife. He had children. And then he became a pastor, a shepherd of the flock of Moses, Jethro, his father-in-law. Now, in this story, the second 40 years, I found a very interesting episode. One day, this is the familiar story, that Moses saw this miraculous event that was going on in one of the bushes there, and this caught the attention of Moses, and there is an episode that I want all of us to learn from the scripture. So if you may allow me, I would like to give a title to our conversation in God's Word today, Excuse Me, Lord, because in that instance, in that encounter of Moses, he gave a lot of excuses, which I believe, when we study today, we will all see our lives in Moses' shoes, and we see that we have no difference with Moses. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you, because there is a danger at the end of the day, when we hear God's call, when you receive God's revelation for your life, and God wants you to do something, and you keep on excusing yourself, and ultimately decline what God wants you to do, there is a risk, and there's a danger in declining to what God has called you to be or to do. When was the last time we give excuses? Some are lame excuses. All of us, I'm sure, have given excuses one way or another. Some are very lame. Like my children, Pa, can you write an excuse letter to my school? Why? Please excuse my son for not attending the school or the class because it's raining. And I can hear the teacher saying, you don't have umbrella? So there are many lame excuses which most of us are familiar. But Moses, later on, I want you to see and judge for yourself. Was Moses giving an excuse for the sake of excusing himself? Was he a reluctant person? Was he hesitant? Or was he just giving a lame excuse to God? Now, at the outset, if there is one very important principle I want you to catch in our discovery of Moses' life, there is one very important truth that I want you to bring home today, is to look to God's sufficiency, not your inadequacy. It's very important that we focus on God's greatness, not on our weakness. Because there is a tendency, most of the time, we look at our limitation and we look at God's task and we say, I cannot do it, because we are focusing on our shortcomings and limitations and weakness rather than focusing on God's greatness. Now let's go to Exodus chapter 3. Here's a portion in the life of Moses that I want you to really focus your attention, because there is a life-changing truth and story here. Exodus chapter 3. One day, Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro. Remember that? The second 40 years. He was a shepherd from a prince of Egypt. He became a shepherd because he was running away from an issue that happened in Egypt. He was hiding in Midian. One day he was tending the sheep of his father-in-law. And then he led the flock far into the wilderness and came to Sinai, the mountain of God. He was leading the flock. He didn't know he led it so far that he reached the area of Sinai where God would reveal to him someday where they would go around during the Exodus and go back to this place where God would give the 10 Commandments to the Israelites. So this is the first encounter of Moses in Sinai. Was it an accident? I don't think so. Maybe God is leading Moses into the wilderness to reach that place after 40 years. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the middle of a bush. Moses stared in amazement. Though the bush was engulfed in flames, it didn't burn up. Now, many scholars believe, and they would comment, that burning bush is a natural occurrence in a desert in Sinai because of heat. But this is different. God got the attention of Moses, and the next verse tells us, this is amazing, sabi ni Moses. He said to himself, and why isn't that bush burning up? I must go and see it. God would do such thing to just catch your attention. Maybe you are busy so much. Do you think Moses was evading God? And little did he realize that God was attracting Moses and finally got his attention. Why? Because you're running away from me, Moses. You have an unsettled issue in Egypt, and do you think you can hide from me in this desert? Little did you realize that you're standing in one of the mountains where I will reveal myself to you. God has His way of getting our attention, sometimes through trials. Moses, in his case, slowly he went to see that bush. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moses, Moses, can you feel the urgency? Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. And I believe Moses was wondering, who was calling me? Do not come any closer, the Lord warned. Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground. Now, Moses was familiar of holy ground because he grew up in Egypt. You know, there are many gods and goddesses in Egypt, in the palace of Pharaoh. He's familiar with what is holy. And here comes God growing now the boundaries for Moses to respect, entering now into the very presence of Yahweh. Take off your sandals, Moses, because you are now standing on holy ground. God establishing now a very important rule and realization for Moses. And then he said this. I really appreciate God. He would not just intervene and just do what He wants to do in our lives. He's a very courteous and polite God. Look at God here. He introduced Himself to Moses. I am the God of your father Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In other words, what God is saying, Moses, don't be afraid. I am not a stranger to you, to your people. I am actually real. Your fathers and your people, they know me. Your ancestors worship me. When Moses heard this, he covered his face. Why? Because he was afraid to look at God. Why? He had this idea that there is this God who chose them as His own people. But he had never encountered the God of Israel. So this is the first time, a personal encounter. And then at that instance, God said to Moses, the reason why I appeared to you is because I heard the cry of my people in Egypt. I know the harshness of the Egyptians. That's why I came down to rescue them, Moses. And then God said this next verse, which is a moment of truth. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. Now this is not something easy for Moses to hear. You must lead my people, Israel, out of Egypt. Now this is the commissioning part. Moses, I appeared to you because I have chosen you, and I want you to go for me and deliver my people Israel from the bondage of Egypt. But Moses, look at the excuse. First time Moses excused himself to God. He protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? Lord, this task is so big. This is so huge for me. And who am I? I am just a humble person. Pwede rin. He may be telling the truth, but this is the first excuse of Moses, which I believe he was telling to God, underline, which is between the lines, he was saying, Lord, are you really sure? Who am I? Lord, have you forgotten? I'm wanted in Egypt. The very reason why I'm hiding in Midian now is because I killed an Egyptian. Have you forgotten that, Lord? And you're sending me, a murderer, I'm wanted in Egypt. Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? As if Moses was asking God, did you think about it? Are you mistaken, Lord? Who am I to lead your people out of Egypt? And God was so patient with Moses. Look how God answered Moses. I will be with you, Moses. This is your sign that I am the one who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain in Sinai. What a comforting assurance. I will be with you. As if God is saying, the first time you attempted to deliver my people out of Egypt is you killed an Egyptian. You did it on your own strength. But this time, Moses, I will be with you. You can't do it alone. You can't do it on your own, Moses. That's why you failed. Because you did it on your own strength, believing that you can do it your own way. One by one, maybe you're planning to kill them. But this time, Moses, I will be with you. Go for me. Go for me and deliver my people out of Egypt. And the sign, Moses, is that you will come back to this mountain. You will lead my people to come back to this mountain and you will worship me in Sinai. But Moses, second time, protested. Look at Moses. That's why, excuse me, Lord, excuse me. Protested. If I go to the people of Israel and tell them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, what is His name? Then what should I tell them? Now, take note of the question. The people will not ask whose God it is. Because they know the God of Israel. They know the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But the question is, what is His name? Meaning, what Because in the name of God, it corresponds the power and the might and the resources of the God who is sending you. Never been that God revealed His ancient name to a people. This is the first time, and look how God responded to Moses. God replied to Moses saying, I am who I am. In the Hebrew, this is the tetragrammaton, which is the Yahweh. YHWH. Until now, we don't know how to pronounce that Hebrew name, which the Jewish people revere that name so much that they don't want to utter that name. They don't want to say those names. That's how holy the name of Yahweh. I am who I am. I am sending you. I am has sent me to you. Tell my people I am is sending you. For the first time, the name of God was given. And that name, until now, if you go to Israel, until now, they won't dare to use that name or to say that name of God. Tell them, Moses, I am who I am. And then the following verses, God told Moses, you go to the elders of Israel, you go to the leaders of Israel, tell them, and they will believe you, Moses. And then all of you would go to Pharaoh and tell Pharaoh, lead my people, give them 3 days off, and lead my people 3 days journey to worship me. But you know, Moses, Pharaoh will not agree. That's why I will show Pharaoh and Egypt the mighty hand of God. And you know the film, 10 Commandments, the 10 plagues of Moses and the show forth. It's a showcase of God's power against the gods of the Egyptians. God would humiliate the gods and the goddesses of the Egyptians and demonstrate His power that there is only one God, true God, that is the God, the creator of the heavens and the earth. We know the story. What a comforting message to Moses. But chapter 4, the story did not end there. Look at this. Moses again protested God. Moses again excused himself. What if, Lord, excuse me, one more thing, Lord. What if they won't believe me? What if they would not listen to me? What if they say, Moses, you're just making up that story? The Lord never appeared to you. What if one of them, Lord, would recognize me and say, oh, you were the one who killed the Egyptian. You were the one who was running. You were the one who was wanted. And maybe you're just making it up. What if the Israelites, the Hebrew, would not believe me? Look at the response of God. Then the Lord said to Moses, what is that in your hand, Moses? A staff, Lord, a wood that maybe I pick up from one of those in my journey, Lord, in this desert of Sinai or of Midian. And the Lord said, that's enough. Give it to me, Moses. Put it down and read the Bible. Put it down, Moses. And Moses placed down the rod, and the rod became a snake. And Moses was natakot si Moses. He jumped off, and then God said, pick up the snake from its tail. And then Moses did it, and the Lord, see, that's the sign, Moses. Put your hands in under your pocket, Moses. And he placed his hand, at pagtanggal po niya, his hands became leprous. And then the Lord said, put it back, Moses. When he put it back, and it became clean. And then the Lord said to Moses, if they would not believe you, Moses, get a pail of water. Pour the water, Moses, because I will turn the water into blood. Then they will believe you, Moses. 3 signs were given to Moses. Do you think Moses finally believed God and say, okay, I think with these 3 signs, I'll be rich. I'll be a good magician in Egypt. You know what happened? Moses again pleaded. It says here, pleaded, not protested. Nagmakaawa na si Moses. Pleaded, oh Lord, I am not very good with words. Lord, I've never been and I am not now. Even though you have spoken to me, I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled. I'm stammering, Lord. Did you not see? Lord, I can't do it. You remember those times when we were in high school or elementary and we are reporting in front of the class and we cannot even put up our feet and our teacher would say, stop! Because we're nervous, because that's the reason why one of the most important principles we can learn is to look to God's sufficiency, not your inadequacy. Because when we look at ourselves, we only find weakness and limitations. That's exactly what's going on. God was telling Moses, you don't look at yourself, Moses. Do you think I don't know your weaknesses? I know you. I preserved you in the Nile when you were floating. Do you think God didn't know the inadequacy of Moses? Was just Moses giving a lame excuse? Is it really true that Moses was not eloquent in his speech? Look what Acts 7 says. Acts chapter 7, Stephen was giving his speech in front of the Sanhedrin, and he said something about Moses. Moses was taught in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was powerful in both speech and action. Busted si Moses. You're lying, Moses. Stephen said, you were trained. You were powerful in speech and in action. That's what Stephen said in Acts chapter 7. And I was reflecting, what happened to Moses? He was courageous. He was killing an Egyptian. What happened to the bold Moses? What happened to the courageous Moses 40 years ago? Why was Moses hesitant and reluctant at this moment? Why did Moses feel intimidated, looking at inadequacy and his weakness? What happened to the courageous Moses 40 years ago? Was he feeling old? Or maybe he was comparing himself to the magnitude of the task that was set before him. And instead of looking to God's sufficiency, he was looking at his own inadequacy, and he felt so limited and weak and small. You're not telling the truth, Moses. You were educated in Egypt in all the wisdom, literature, philosophy, engineering. In Egypt, Moses, the then known civilization of the world. You were educated, Moses. You can speak Egyptian, Moses. Why are you reluctant? Why are you giving excuses? Then the next verse tells us, the Lord asked Moses, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like God is a bit hurt at this moment. Then God asked Moses, who makes a person's mouth? I think God is irritated with Moses here. Because Moses was giving excuses upon excuses. And the Lord said to Moses, Teka, Moses, who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether a person will speak or not? Who decides whether the person would hear or not? In that case, why are you excusing yourself? Is it not I, the Lord? What is God telling here? I created you, Moses. I'm the one who gives you the mouth, the tongue, the eyes, the brain, the ears. I gave you everything, Moses. I decide who speaks and who does not speak. If God is the creator of mouth and lips, God can just turn Moses to be, I can give you the words to say. Just look to me, to my sufficiency, not your inadequacy, Moses. Then the Lord said, now go, I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you in what to say. But God was very patient with Moses, just like He is patient to each and every one of us. What are your excuses, brothers and sisters? Go, Moses, go, I will be with you. As you speak, and I will instruct you. Do you think Moses said, yes, Lord, send me wherever you want me to send? Look at the next verse. Hold on to your seats. But Moses pleaded again, Lord, please send anyone else. Can you imagine Moses? Can you imagine? He can do that to God. Lord, parang awa mo na, Lord. Si Brother Cecil na lang. Di ba? Lord, send him, send her, send na lang my wife, not me. My children na lang, Lord. Let my kids do it, not me. Lord, please send anyone else. Read the next verse, ang sabi ng Diyos, medyo nainis na ang Diyos sa kanya. Okay, is not your brother Aaron on his way to fetch you? Listen to this very carefully. Si Aaron parating to fetch him, the older brother. And God said, okay, alam niyo po mga kapatid, because of our stubbornness, because of our disobedience, God sometimes allows what we want in our stubbornness, and we suffer the consequence of it. Moses settled for the second best. And God, in His maybe permissive will, allowed Moses, okay, your brother Aaron is coming, that's your choice, Moses. You will go with your brother Aaron. And you know what happened with Aaron? He was the one who made the golden calf, the idolatry that people worship when Moses was in Sinai receiving the 10 Commandments. His own brother, who was his spokesman, was the leader of the rebellion of the Israelites against God. And Aaron became very critical of him, of his leadership. He was very negative of his leadership. I believe Moses, in the long run, in the story, he learned his mistake that I settled for the second best. That's why I warn each and every one of us, there is a risk when we decline to obey the call and the mandate of God. There are consequences along the way. Sabi ng Diyos, oh sige na nga, sa tigas ng ulo mo. Siguro wala sa Bible, ako niya, this is my words. Your brother Aaron is coming, magsama na kayo. But read the story of Moses in the long run. Moses found himself, he was actually good. He was the one speaking in the middle and at the end of his journey. Because he learned that you don't settle for second best. In summary, what were the excuses of Moses? I am a nobody, Lord. You're making a mistake. Do you think so? Do you think he was preserved in the Nile River because of accident? Do you think you're here because you're lucky and fortunate to get a job? Do you think God is not involved when you're elementary days, high school days? Do you think God is not there? Do you think Moses was lucky and fortunate enough to survive the mass slaughter of babies in Egypt? No, Moses. I knew you before I formed you. Remember what he said to Jeremiah? I don't know your name. Oh, that's my name. Binigay ng Diyos. Lame excuse, Moses. The elders won't believe me. Show them the signs, Moses. I am not a fluent speaker. You're lying. You were educated in Egypt. You're powerful in speech and in action. At the end of the day, the final excuse of Moses, his heart was revealed. He was reluctant. Please, Lord, send someone else. Kamusta mga kapatid? How are you and me today? What is our excuses today? I'm busy, Lord. I have so many work. I have double jobs, Lord. You know, I don't have time for what you're asking me to do. Lord, I am not educated. I don't even graduate elementary, Lord. Please send someone else. Lord, not this time, Lord. I have so many condominiums that I am paying in the Philippines. Lord, I don't have time for what you're asking me to do. Lord, did you know that I have a very high paying salary? You can't afford me. What is your excuse to God? Lord, I have so many children to feed and they eat a lot, Lord, you know. Please send someone else. What is your excuse? Lord, 5 years na lang, I will retire. Can you please wait? I'll get my pension and everything. Then, you come back to me, Lord. Or are we saying, Lord, not me. Let my children go. Let them fulfill what you want. What is your excuse? Are you saying, Lord, I am the wrong guy? You're making a mistake. Or maybe you're saying, Lord, did you know that I have a bad reputation in my family? They will not believe me. Do you think hindi alam ng Diyos yun? What is your excuse? Do you think God made the wrong choice? 40 years ago, 80 years ago, God waited for Moses? Or was Moses ignorant of his special qualification? Do you think God made the wrong choice to preserve the life of Moses? Or was Moses just ignorant of his special qualification? Why? Because God was preparing him from the time he was born. To be raised in Egypt for 40 years is not a joke. That's part of the plan. He was educated in the language and culture and the values of the Egyptians. He is the right man because he understands the Egyptians' way of thinking. He can speak the language of Egyptians. He knows the in and out of Egypt. He is the right guy. But he didn't realize that special qualification. Moses was just ignorant or reluctant to obey God. What is that in your hand? Maybe God is asking you also today, what do you have now? If you will give it to me. Even if it's hurts, pain, sin, forgiven sins, bad rep, anything. If you give it to me, I can turn it to be useful for my glory. What do you have, Moses? A staff, a wooden staff. May value ba to? Give it to me, Moses, your staff. Put it on the ground, Moses. And you see the demonstration of God's power using that ordinary wooden staff. Moses raised that staff and the Red Sea divides. What do you have in your life? Give it to me. God is saying, and you will be surprised that I can do miraculous things through your ordinary and simple life. We don't need to look for more credentials. I need to go to Bible school. It's good. I need to finish college. Yes, it's good. But we don't need to look for more credential or more money. Lord, I'm still saving. Or more prestigious platform. What we need, we can begin with what we have. A willing heart is the most important thing we can give to God. Lord, you know me in and out. But if you're calling me and if you have chosen me, what I have is only a willing heart. And if you give it to God, you'll be surprised of what God will do and can do. Most of the time, we are intimidated by our limitation rather than encouraged by the greatness of the one who is calling you. That's why the principle I want you to bring home is look to God's sufficiency, not our inadequacy, not our limitation. Because when you look at yourself, when we look at ourselves, we only find ugly things. We only find our limitation and weakness. And we can say, I cannot do it. Of course, Moses, you tried to do it on your own and you failed because I'm not with you. But this time is different, Moses. I want you to go for me and I will be with you. You remember Joseph, a slave in Egypt, but with a willing heart, turned to become the prime minister of Egypt, instrumental in the saving of thousands, if not millions of lives, and even his family from the famine. Remember Peter, an ordinary fisherman, was willing with a willing heart, gave himself to God, and God used him tremendously. Remember Esther, a foreigner in Persia, and yet he was there for such a time as this. She was used by God to save thousands of her people, Israel. Remember Paul? A notorious man, a murderer of the Christians and the follower of the way. But when he gave his life to God, he became a tireless servant and church planter for Christ. Daniel, an exile, a young people exile in Babylon, slave, gave his life to God, turned out to become a counselor to the great king Nebuchadnezzar. What do you have in your heart? What do you have in your life? Look to God's sufficiency, not your inadequacy. Look to God's greatness, not your weakness. That's the key. Because we have a God who is unlimited and who can do great and mighty things through each and every one of us. Instead of saying, Lord, excuse me, we can say today, Lord, enable me to obey and follow you, Lord. Instead of giving excuses one after another like Moses, believe God and ask God to enable you to obey and follow. That's the right prayer. That's the right response. Lord, enable me that I may follow and obey you because I look to your sufficiency, not my inadequacy. We may be utterly correct in our assessment of our weaknesses, but to those whom God lends His strength, weaknesses are irrelevant because nothing is impossible if you entrust it to God. Ask Him, what do you want me to do, Lord? And then if you hear God's voice, you don't say, Lord, excuse me, please someone else. Send them, Lord. Send Pastor Butch. Send all the pastors, but not me, Lord. I still have 5 years. Let me just finish my retirement, Lord. Or send my children. Don't give excuses to God. Instead, say, Lord, enable me. Enable me, Lord. I would close with this prayer of Hebrews 13. Look at this prayer of Hebrews 13. May He equip you with all you need for doing His will. May He produce in you, through the power of Jesus Christ, every good thing that is pleasing to Him. All glory to Him forever and ever. That's my prayer.